It's 1943, and Germany believes its dams, critically important for the war effort, are invulnerable to British bombs. Then, a single Lancaster bomber drops to 60 feet and unleashes a strange tumbling barrel out of its bomb bay. In astonishment, German soldiers watch this barrel bounce right over the torpedo nets protecting one of the biggest dams in Germany, then run up the side of the dam before falling back down. The explosion is tremendous, and British dam busters are about to turn the tide of the war with the weirdest weapon in World War II. Thanks to the entry of the United States into the war, the British Army had backup, but breaking through the German defenses was proving challenging. The Nazis were relying heavily on the Ruhr Valley, a heavily industrialized region where the waters were kept in check by a series of dams. These dams not only kept the area safe from flooding, but they were also key sources of hydroelectric power for the region and provided drinking water. They were also key to the canals running through the region. Any failure in the dams could be devastating, and that's exactly what the British were counting on. Even before the war, the British had set their sights on the Ruhr Valley as a potential target in the event of a conflict. Now, with the Nazis threatening to conquer the British Isles, they knew that this might be the way to turn the tides. There was just one problem. They didn't have a weapon that was capable of breaking through the defenses. The dams were heavily fortified, too strong to be attacked from the air. Their only vulnerable spots were their base, but the Germans knew that. The dams were protected by underwater torpedo nets that would stop the bombs short of their target. This would be one of the trickiest missions of the war, and it would require a new type of weapon. The beginnings of Operation Chastity were found in the notes of Barnes Wallis, a weapons designer at the British engineering firm Vickers. He had designed some of the Royal Air Force's most powerful bombers and was working on anti-ship weapons when he was called back into service to figure out how to destroy the dams. His first idea? A much bigger bomb, one of the most powerful conventional weapons ever created. If it hit its target, it would break through the fortifications and shatter the dam. There was just one problem with his plan. The British had some big bombers, but none were equipped to carry a bomb of that size. Also, their planes weren't designed to fly at the altitude needed to deliver the weapon, nicknamed an earthquake bomb because of its high speed, high altitude delivery. He proposed a bigger bomber, but the time and money needed were unacceptable. So the plan was scrapped, and Wallace started to focus on the dam's weak point. Getting to it from the top was impractical, but if he could figure out a way around the torpedo nets, it would be easy to cause massive damage. It was a new kind of war, and it was time to throw out all previous thinking about bombs. Wallace's next design took everyone by surprise. It was almost a third of the size of the previous model, only about 9,000 pounds, but it actually wasn't a bomb at all. It was a mine shaped like a cylinder that would work like a depth charge. Instead of being dropped from a high height, it only needed to be launched 60 feet above the water. Sent flying toward the target at 240 miles an hour, it would speed toward the target and skip across the water. The backspin would cause the bomb to run across the side of the dam before hitting the base, detonating with a massive impact. And it looked more like an oil drum than a high-tech bomb, but it packed a punch. Now it was time to test this new concept. The first task was blowing up a scale model dam. After this passed with flying colors, the British military tested it on an abandoned dam in Wales and determined that it needed a charge of 7,500 pounds to breach the dam. This brought the bomb within the levels that could be carried by the popular Avro Lancaster airplane. As the military conducted airdrop trials and the airplanes were adapted to carry the massive bomb, a new stumbling block emerged in the mission. It was the worst nightmare of designers everywhere: bureaucracy. Air Vice Marshal Francis Linnell of the Ministry of Aircraft Production was not pleased. He wanted Wallace focusing on developing new aircraft, but Wallace was pressured to resign after the head of Bomber Command denied the allocation of the bombers. The whole project was in danger until the chief of the air staff heard about the project. The higher-ups were convinced of the mission's necessity. Wallace got his bombers, and the design of what would be known as the upkeep mines continued. The mission was scheduled for May of 1943, when the high waters would make it easier to deliver the payload underwater. It was 8 weeks to the mission, and there was a lot of work to be done. The modifications to the Lancasters still needed to be completed, and the mine had to be perfected. But there was one other piece to the mission. Someone needed to take on the incredibly dangerous mission into enemy territory. They'd be delivering a payload to one of the most closely guarded locations in the Nazi regime, at serious risk of capture or death, and they had to pull off a military maneuver never before attempted in combat. The wrong team being selected could turn the tide of the war against the British, and it all fell on No. 5 Group RAF. This elite unit was one of Britain's best, but it wasn't only British. It contained Allied soldiers from Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. They were briefed on their mission and would target a pair of dams, the Möhne and the Sorpe, both upstream from the Ruhr industrial area. They had a secondary target, the Eder Dam, if things went south. The goal? To deliver a devastating blow to German infrastructure, cut off their hydroelectric power, and disrupt the flow of water to factory cities and canals. The hit could also cause major flooding if the damage was serious enough. The entire war could hinge challenge on this one bombing raid. The mission would take place at night for the maximum chance of success, and the team quickly began training in low light and low altitude flying. The technical advisors struggled to solve issues such as the visibility of the target and determining the aircraft's altitude. Every little detail of the mission could be the difference between success and failure, and some spotlights attached to the plane promised to solve the altitude problem. But the mission would also need brains in the cockpit, and the Royal Air Force chose one of their best men to lead the charge, and he was only 25 years old. Guy Penrose Gibson was already one of the best pilots in the Royal Air Force, and they trusted him with maybe their most critical mission yet. Security was tight on the mission, and early on, only Wallace and Gibson knew the details of the mission. They briefed other soldiers down the line as needed, and on May 13, 1943, they received the bombs. 3 days later, they would take flight, divided into 3 formations that would each hit one target, either the primary ones or falling back to hit the secondary ones. They ran into a last-second disruption. 2 crew members were sick and scrapped from the mission, but nothing would stop Operation Chastity from taking aim. The routes to the targets were well scouted, and the planes avoided the areas with known anti-aircraft guns. One bomber was late due to a coolant leak, but 2.5 hours before midnight they started taking off. Soon all 3 formations were in the air, flying low to avoid German radar. One radio operator tracking them observed a plane and was shocked by what he saw. One of the pilots was flying so low he was actually below tree level, but it wouldn't be long before the planes hit rough waters. Formation number 2 was the first to hit trouble. Some bombers were damaged and lost their radio or bombs, while others crashed or were forced to bail out. But formation number 1 fared differently, and soon the Mona Dam was in sight. They took heavy anti-aircraft fire but ultimately delivered a devastating hit to the Mona, and the massive structure was breached. But the Allies weren't done yet. Next up was the Eater Dam, and the pilots soon realized there would be trouble. The valley was extremely foggy, but this actually turned into an advantage. The geography in the fog made it harder to defend the dam with anti-aircraft guns, and they didn't take as many hits as they did in the first strike. But that didn't mean it wouldn't be challenging. It took one plane 6 tries to find the target, and another bomb struck the top of the dam and damaged the aircraft. Ultimately, the final bomb of the formation hit its target and shattered the dam's defenses. The next test would be the hardest yet. The Sorpe Dam was the mission's reach goal. It was much hardier than the other 2, made of earthen material rather than concrete and steel. By the time the squadron was ready to attack it, only 2 planes remained. A close call with a church steeple in the region nearly took out one plane, and there was no time for a bomb aimer to get a perfect shot. It took 9 failed bombing runs before the bomb was finally dropped, and it hit, but not perfectly. The top of the dam was damaged, but the core structure was intact. Now there was just one challenge left: get home. 2 more planes were lost on the way back, but back at the base in Scampton, the mission commanders waited anxiously to see who would return. Ultimately, 11 bombers returned, with Mission Commander Guy Gibson returning over an hour after the first survivor. The last survivors of this extremely dangerous mission arrived 2 hours later. In total, 8 of the 19 planes that took off to deliver a devastating blow to the German war machine were lost, but the punch they delivered to the enemy was far more devastating. The Bomber Command had put a lot into the mission, and the cost in human life were harsh, but the results were worth it. 2 massive dams had been breached, and soon afterward, huge floods laid waste to the region. A pilot that scouted the area observed that he could only see treetops and church steeples poking above the floodwaters. It took a long time for the full damage to be assessed, but now it's believed that around 1,600 people in the region died in the floods, and the financial cost was incalculable. The unit's bravery and Barnes-Wallace's ingenuity had paid off. 80 of the 153 dam busters survived the mission, and they were all highly honored for their service. Guy Gibson in particular became the most decorated soldier in British history at the time before returning to war. But as time went on, a debate began. It was a highly effective mission, maybe too effective. In harnessing the forces of nature to devastate a German region, the British unleashed mass casualties. Most of the victims of the flood were civilians, many of them foreign workers and prisoners of war. To honor the heroes or mourn the victims? The question would be debated for decades. The war was eventually won, and the story of the dam busters passed into history. It wouldn't be long before the silver screen came calling, and in 1955, a movie was made based on a series of books about the raid. Not only was it the most popular film of the year in Britain, but its depiction of the pinpoint strike against a massive structure's most vulnerable point reportedly inspired the iconic strike on the Death Star in Star Wars. But it would have a different impact on the future of war. In 1977, an amendment to the Geneva Convention outlawed attacking dams if it could cause severe losses among civilian population. An exception was made for if the dam was critical to military operations and there's no other way to neutralize it, but the shock and awe of Operation Chastity had horrified enough people that they wanted to make sure it would never happen again. One figure of the strike, though, couldn't be reached for comment. Like so many other war heroes, Guy Gibson returned to combat after his most heroic mission. He took tours of Canada and the US first, but eventually returned to service. Over a year after the Dam Busters mission, he would be involved in an attack on Bremen, where his plane crashed for unknown reasons, and he became one of the many fallen of World War II. For more on World War II artillery, check out How Close Did Nazis Come to Creating the Atomic Bomb, or watch Worst War Crimes Committed by the United States During World War II for some other controversial missions.